Tanche Nitsigasan Mo Clark, Equa Nigamopia Seo, Equa Osawi Kinoseo. Nitotsin Otosquanik Maganiwigan Jojage Munyang Montreal. Ya Oma Otepim Seo Hapitawi Gosisan Tastawaya Kiinu Equa Munyao. Ya Oma Onigamo. So I just introduced myself, Tanche Nitotamak. Hello friends. My name is Mo Clark and I am a Métis mixed settler, two-spirit performer, artist, musician, creator, and workshop facilitator, as well as Oskapios, which is Elder's Helper. I grew up in the prairies, so I'm a prairie person. That's like my heart and soul. I grew up in Treaty 7 in Calgary, and I now currently live in Montreal in Quebec, and I've lived there for 18 years. And I'm just really honored to be able to share some of my experiences, some of my stories, and I really hope that whatever medicines, whatever tools, whatever gifts I share today, you can take from them what is supportive and inspiring and can help motivate you all on your paths. When I was thinking about this process, who and what and where and how did I become the person I am today? And what are some of the beautiful challenges and obstacles I've experienced? And also, what are some of the incredible moments and memories that have made me who I am? So I really want to start with, what makes your story authentic and what makes you, you. I think in terms of creation and being an entrepreneur in any realm. So for me, it's really in like vocal creation, creative collaboration or creative kinship. It's really in project planning and development for potentially large scale shows at festivals, touring and traveling the world, creating an album, workshop facilitation with Native Friendship Centers, with folks in lockdown facilities, with elementary through to post-secondary students, and doing a lot of ceremony. My work really sits at the intersection of culture, of land-centered practice, of ceremony, and creativity. And so where I kind of begin my story is sitting around a campfire with my family while I was little. We would travel every summer to the Cypress Hills in southeastern Alberta. And it's there that I really felt for the first time what is song and how is song medicine. And I often introduce myself when I'm traveling and visiting other territories. I often say that my first language is song, was song. So before I could speak, before I knew how to share my story, before I really knew who I was, I knew that there was a deep inherent relationship and connection to song. I grew up a very quiet kid. I was super shy, super timid. There's a story that I was so afraid to even go to kindergarten, but it was actually my teacher, Miss Fulton, who played the auto harp that really inspired me and really drew me in. And it was something about being surrounded by and being next to or close to music and song that I felt the most home. And in language, I'm also a language speaker, so I've been learning Nehiawewin, which is Plains Cree, for the last 12 years. And I'll share more about that process throughout these episodes. And I'm recently a Michif language learner. But from the Treaty Elders of Saskatchewan, they use the word Miskasawin. And when we break down that word, we get misk or miska, which means to look or to find. We get so, which is the root of soki or soke tamawin, which is strength or courage. And anything that ends with win is to be in the state of. So miskasawin is to find one's place in the circle, which means to belong. And I think that this is like the first root or the first value that I want to highlight in my own journey What are these different moments in my life and in my story where I have found and I have felt Muskasawin? I have felt myself in relationship to the world around me and to the world within me in a good way. And from that place, I've been able to cultivate my gifts and acknowledge that I have them, that they are good medicine, and that when those gifts are working to support my well-being, they're working to support the well-being of all my relations. Newakomaganak, or we say Wagutawin. So Wagutawin's another important term that I will be sharing a lot about throughout these talks as well. And Wagutawin was first introduced to me by Joseph Natauhau, who's one of my elders. And Wagutawin is kinship. And this is a really old term. It's also a treaty word. And Wagutawin relates to all of our relations. So those are the plants, the trees, the waters, the airs, the winds, all the medicines, the stone beings, the creepy crawlers, the swimming ones, the flying ones, the four-leggeds, the ones who are up in the trees. There are families, both blood and chosen. There are collaborators. There are spirit guides. So Wagutawin suggests like a holistic understanding of all that which sustains us and all that which helps us to live Miupimatsuin, a good life. So I'm really acknowledging in my work these principles. And in order for me to find Muskasawin to belong, I need to acknowledge Wagutawin, all those who have shaped who I am today. So I go back to that fire. I go back to the fire, to the flame, to the heat in the Cypress Hills in southern Alberta, sitting in circle with my family, where we would sing every night. We would sing campfire songs. So these weren't necessarily like traditional Indigenous songs. They were very simple, folky kind of music. But it was in that space that I heard my voice. I heard the voice of my grandparents. I heard the voice of my parents and my sisters. And I felt love. I felt belonging. And that was not always common in my childhood, feeling a sense of peace within myself. And so it was through those songs and through that orientation and looking up at the night sky and seeing the Milky Way and just being on the land, being in the trees, those gifts instilled in me such a sense of who I am today. And it was later on in life when I was starting to connect more with the Métis Nation, particularly the Métis Nation of Alberta, that I met an old storyteller, Wandering Wally, who sent me an invite to come back to those same Cypress Hills. And so later on, I'm, probably about 20 years old, I find myself driving solo with this little hand-drawn map that this elder had given me at a intergenerational, interactive storytelling gathering with Métis elders and youth, and I had been volunteering. And I found myself driving the 4-hour drive from Calgary all the way to Elkwater Lake, which is in the Cypress. And I could feel those memories, and I could feel all of those summers of traveling to that land, traveling to that place, coming back into me. Only this time it was coming into me from a place of being culturally grounded and in relationship to who are the Métis, who am I as a Métis person, and what does it mean to be invited into these contexts later in life to actually be able to uplift, acknowledge, and relate to us as a nation and us as a people. And so I feel like the land called me back more than anything. And that is part of the belonging for me, that those songs came from family, but it was really the land who held us and the land who continues to hold me in my work and in my creativity. So the land, I'd say, is one of my first teachers. And we say Aski Oma is land. Or even beyond that, Gagawi no Aski, which is Mother Earth. And recently I was at a gathering and Nehino elder Ron Cook heard me sing. And he came up to me and he asked me if I knew what singing meant in language. And he broke it down for me. I knew that Nigamoin is to be in the state of singing, Nigamo is to sing, And this is my spirit name, Nigamo Pieseo, which is singing thunderbird. But he broke it down to Niga, which comes from Nigawi, which is mother, and Ayamo or Ayami, which means to speak. So when we sing, in essence and in relation to Cree worldview, we are actually singing the voice of the land. And so I really feel connected to that. And even drum comes from the word tewagen. So my frame drum that I'll share a song on a few times comes from ote or mite, which means heart, and tewege, which means to sound. So when we play the drum, we are sounding the heartbeat of the land, and we are sounding the heartbeat of all creation. And when we sing and we drum, we are really animating, and we are really acknowledging, and we're uplifting those relationships to land and to creation. So I really hold this story, and as I share it with the request or the ask of all of you. What are the stories that have made you who you are today? What are the defining moments, those core memories? We say kiskisawin, which is to remember. What are those core memories that highlighted for you, that supported and that acknowledged your gifts throughout your life, that helped you to build those relationships, that give you the strength, the courage, the perseverance, the wisdom, the knowing, the knowledge that you're carrying forward in your work, in your creative practices today. And I would invite you to write them out, to story them, to highlight the different moments, to remember who was there, what was there, and how do those moments connect you with your values. So what are the essential values that you carry with you in your creative practice? So I've named some of mine, and I'm curious to hear what yours are. In extending beyond that, I also want to share like a couple more stories. So I wasn't just singing around a campfire, I was also singing in music groups as a kid. So I played soccer for a while. That's what my older sister did. So, second child of 3 kids. I just follow the lead. But, soccer was fun, but it wasn't really my thing. And it wasn't until someone on my soccer team invited me to come and perform in this little music group that they were forming called Kids Are Music. And we would rehearse in their basement, once a week, or the community center. And we learned how to sing. We learned how to do harmony. And I really learned in that moment that I love singing, and I love singing with others, and I love listening for harmonies, and I love exploring, the different dimensions of song. So really learning about like the structure and the form and the craft of what makes a song complete. And so throughout all that, learning how to warm up our voices, learning how to take care of our voices. And then eventually we would go and do performances, these community performances. And I remember one moment in particular where we were performing for an old folks home, like an elderly care home. And I was performing this little solo. Wasn't anything super special, but at the moment it was quite. And to close off the performance, I had a little cane, and I lifted up the cane and I pointed it to this old woman in the front row. And the closing words were, "It had to be you." And this little old lady, she reaches down and she picks up her cane and she points it back at me. And it was such a significant moment of realizing and really landing into myself. I think I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, of how special and how important song is to connect us, to help us feel less alone, to help us come out of maybe isolated spaces, and that it can help us connect between generations, between cultures, between communities, beliefs, And it was later on as well that, we would also go caroling every winter with my family. We weren't really religious, but, we would fight over what songs we were going to sing after like a big Christmas Eve dinner. And we would go around the cul-de-sac on Trap Road in Okotoks, Alberta with my grandparents and cousins and uncle. And it was always a little bit of a family affair, but we would go door to door and we'd knock on the door. One of us would run to the front, knock on the door, and then we would all stand back and we would sing just a couple songs. And one of the nights that we went out caroling, the woman didn't come out of her house while we were singing, and she just stood in the window. And when we finished singing, she finally emerged from her house and she turned to us and she said, this is the first winter that my husband hasn't been with us. And it's been a really hard time, but your singing has brought me so much joy, and it's reminded me of, the beauty and the love of this time of year. And so for me, that was another moment that I recall in my little person brain. I don't have many memories from growing up as a child, but those memories were really the core memories and the ones that most resonated with me as I think about what are the gifts that I'm carrying and what are the teachings that I have. So jump forward a few years, and I'm traveling around a lot, and I'm starting to learn Cree and starting to also participate in ceremony. So going to sweat lodge, pipe ceremony, vision fasting, and eventually Sundance. And these were through different community connections and ultimately me showing up. So one of the first songs I ever wrote in language is called Nitako Tan. And Nitako Tan means I have arrived. And the song was co-written with two of my elders, Cheryl Rondell and Joseph Natauhau, who are Cree, and Cheryl's also Métis. And we wrote it on the land in Katepwa, which is Capel Valley, near Lebret, which is where some of my Métis relatives traveled through on their way to Alberta. And we basically walked the land and we gathered medicines near Payapot community, and we sat down and we sipped coffee and drank tea for a few hours with a local elder and knowledge keeper who shared with us some of the teachings and some of the memories of that land and of that place. And throughout all that time, I was slowly learning the language, but it was kind of complicated and kind of challenging, because learning a language and learning anything new can bring about a lot of emotion and for me, a lot of shame, a lot of fear. Who was I to try and take on these teachings, and who was I to try and pick up this language, and why didn't I have any access to language as a kid, and why was our Métis identity so shoved down and pushed away and silenced? And so Joseph described learning language to me as like different steps that are required. And he started with the notion of like, first you have to hear. So it's almost like going to a river when we're learning something, whether it be a language, whether it be how to bead, how to sing, how to hoop dance. We start by going and we witness and we observe. And so he sort of described learning like the first thing is we hear. We go to the river, we start to see the currents, we start to see the way things move, and we start to build a relationship. And we keep returning. Repetition is so important if we're building a craft, if we're learning how to do something, if we're trying to remember and instill in our four bodies, in our physical, our mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies, how to do something, we return. And so eventually, as we return to the river, we start to listen. So it starts to deepen understanding, and it starts to really enter into our blood, into our bones, into our memory. And as we continue to return, we start to understand. And this is when we can start to, to work with and be in relationship to and really have more knowledge of how the currents of the river hit the edge of the stone at a certain time of day. They reflect the light in a different way, and we can see clearly to see where the fish are swimming beneath. And so we start to recognize the depth of something. We start to recognize the subtleties, the nuances, the defining qualities and features teachers that help us to shape our gifts and our capacities, to grow knowledge, to build knowledge. And eventually, as we continue to return, we learn how to carry that knowledge with us, that we don't just have that relationship when we're at the river. We can talk about the river to others when we're far. And as we carry that knowledge, we learn how to take care of it, and then eventually we learn how to love that knowledge. And so Ni Tako Tan, this first song that was ever created, the first words, Ni Tako Tan, means I have arrived. So just arriving into our gifts, arriving at the river, arriving ready to learn, ready to hear, to listen, to understand, to care, to carry, and then to love. The gifts that we're receiving, this is a practice and a process is so essential. So maybe I'll submit the video from this song that I'm talking about because I had the opportunity to make this really beautiful video clip with it. And it was years and years ago, and I'm in the woods in Mount Royal. So it also doesn't matter where you're living, we can utilize the land and the spaces of where we are. Alex Wilson says it's like a micro journey, It's like we can have 1 meter square of roots and soil and earth and tree and sky. And within that space, we can build a ceremony and we can journey. And so the video that I'll share, Ni Tako Tan, is me exploring all of these different layers of learning and of knowledge and of taking care and loving relations. And the video, it follows those 4 directions, which are essential in a lot of the work that I do as well. That's one of my foundational values, that everything exists within a circle. And in order for something to be whole, we have to acknowledge Sagistanok, the eastern door, Apitawagasiganok, the southern door, Pagisimutak, the western door, Kiwetanok, the northern door, sky world, earth, and within. And so that's how I've mapped out this talk as well, looking at those 4 directions, the cardinal directions, some of the teachings contained within them, as well as thinking about dreaming, visioning, and then really coming back to center. So this first direction, I've given you a little bit of a encapsulation and a bit of a trajectory from that eastern doorway, Sagistanok, which is the doorway of the rising sun. It's the doorway of the new dawn, of new beginnings. And when we think of Wapan, which is the word for dawn, it starts with the same sound as Wagutowin, as Waniska, which is to wake up. And so Wa, in and of itself, is that light on the edge of the horizon. And that's how we know that a new day is coming, that the cycle is continuing, and that we're returning to that new moment in time, to that new opportunity to live another day, to do our best, to acquire those gifts, to return and remember the things that we hold dear and that make us whole and make us who we are, so that we can then share them with others, with Wagutowin, with all of our relations. So I wanted to share that with you, and I also wanted to share, in speaking of land, collaboration, ceremony, and creativity as those 4 sort of access points of my work and of my bundle. When I'm singing, and one of the gifts that I've learned that I take with me wherever I go is that song is really home. And that when I look out upon the horizon, I can sing the land, and I can understand and I can follow the curvature of the landscape, whether it be just the outside of a tree, or the little Wapikwania, the wild flowers growing in a meadow, or the mountain ranges of the Rocky Mountains, or a lake. I can use that as a map. It's a song line. So it's basically, instead of a sheet of music, I can look at the horizon, I can look at the land and resonate and respond to and be in relationship with that landscape as part of my body, part of my bundle. And as I sing and trace the sound of the land, I am remembering that relation and I'm putting that into my body. So I'm embodying that moment in time and that place. one of my elders, Senapan Thunder, says that language is time and its place. So in order for us to speak, in order for us to share our gifts, we have to acknowledge what our environment is, who and what exists and thrives and grows and is home in that environment, and how when I sing and I sound, am I breathing and I'm bringing that gift of life into my body, into my spirit, into my mind, mamtanechigan, into my heart, mite. And I'm animating the relationship through these gifts, through song, negamawin, through the drum, tewegin. And so I wanted to share a song that was created in Treaty 6 on the edge of a mountain by the glaciers in Jasper. So I was hiking with my wife, Takatapui Maori artist Victoria Hunt, and she joins me every now and then for Korean tea, which I take every Sunday morning as a continuum of my language journey. And in a few of these sessions, Joseph Natauhau had shared a prayer. And, one of the reasons I wanted to start learning language was I wanted to be able to pray in the language. I wanted to be able to communicate with my ancestors and the land. And I wanted to do that in a way that was both ancient and alive, and that could tap into my spirit and help me to expand my skills and capacities for prayer. Senapan says that to pray, it's to warm up our spirit. It's to warm up our whole being. And by warming up our whole being, we're bringing life and we're bringing intention into ourselves. And so Joseph shared this prayer with us, and I was having a bit of a hard time remembering, because it can be hard to just remember words. But for me, knowing myself and knowing how I best learn and how I best create, it's through song. So as we were hiking this really steep mountain and the air is getting thinner and thinner the higher we get, and there's so much beauty, but it's also a really challenging moment, we stopped. And I turned around and I looked at the mountain across from me, and there's this beautiful glacier that's just like, spilling down, and it's kind of this chalky light blue color. And I took a deep breath and I started to sing the mountain range. And as I did that, the words of the prayers started to come through, and I was able to recall, and I had them written in my cell phone, and so I looked at them. And I used that landscape to help me create the melody and the song form for this prayer. And then as I turned back towards the mountain and we continued to hike up the mountain, I was able to keep singing and keep recalling that prayer. And I've been able to carry this prayer with me in many different places, teach it back to the community and to elders and to youth, as a way to not only exchange and teach the language, but to also expand and extend it into an embodied singing form of prayer. So it's called Nehiawewin Gagisimoin, which is basically a Cree language prayer. It's got a very basic title, but I wanted to share it with you all here today. Na Watos kaeganak Kananas kumitinawaw Pea kisigaw Kawapatamag Eyoiya Wea hey oh hey Way oh way Way yo 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 Wea hey oh way So that is the Cree prayer song. And every time I sing that song, I am in relationship to that mountain. The mountain's called Edith Cavell, and I would really love to know what the indigenous name of that place is. But it's in Treaty 6, and it's where the oldest waters on earth begin. And so often when I'm singing that, if I'm singing it with young ones or with old ones, I'll talk about water, and I'll talk about how we are in right relation and how we are in reverence and uplifting and holding gratitude and honoring the sacredness of water. Water as the keeper of memory, water as the one who helps us to release, to let go, water as the one who refreshes, who nourishes, who gives us life. And I'll invite everyone to imagine in their own minds, in their own memory, their favorite body of water. Whether that be a lake, a river, a creek, a stream, an ocean shoreline, whether that be sipping maple water when they're tapping trees in the bush in spring, whether that be sipping tea with their kokum around the kitchen table, whether that be taking a bath on a cold winter night with lavender oil in it, whatever that body of water is. And so as the song is sung, people get the opportunity to go into their own minds and memories and hearts, and to use the song as medicine and as a returning point for them to animate those relationships within that space and time. And then from there, when the song is finished, I might invite others to sing the vocables with me as a way of working with their voices and working with their bodies to show appreciation, to show gratitude, to show respect, and to honor all of those different bodies of water that have helped us belong. And I also think of all of the animals and beings and plants and stone bodies of Treaty 6 and of that mountain range. And then I also think of all of my relatives from Cree and Tea and anyone who's trying to learn their ancestral language, their mother tongue, their indigenous tongue, how challenging and complicated that can be. But when we engage in community, when we learn in community, and when we work with the land as a point of remembering, the language starts to become part of us. And so that song is a gift that I offer anywhere I go, and I always acknowledge Joseph Naitauhau and Sinapan Thunder and Charlotte Ross, who started that Cree and Tea language learning nest years ago, and it's created so much space for me and so many of our community to continue to come home